Parak Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis, Lev, heart. It's the heart of Tanya. Apparently, it was not an original manuscript. It was something that the Alter Rebbe added in. So that's why a lot of people see this as kind of, I don't call it a sidebar, but kind of like its own thing. You're going along, and all of a sudden Lamed Beis comes around. Sometimes you say Lamed Aleph also, but then Lamed Beis comes around. So, oh, break. We have this new topic to discuss, and now we can go back to everything else. Even though if you really look at it, so of course, if that's how it goes, but if you really look at it, you can kind of see how the setup for it comes from the previous chapters. Obviously, if you go all the way back to Parak Beis, I think you see the setup for it is planted there already, because it talks about how the neshamas coming out to the world, and there's different levels of neshamas, but we're all coming from the same place. It's all chelek elokah mamash. Your chelek is not more elokah than somebody else's. How can you have more of a piece of God in you? Everybody has a piece of God. There's not different sizes of pieces of God. There's just more sensitivity to your piece of God. Who's more of a child? What is that supposed to mean? A child's a child. You're not more of a child. You might be a better behaved child, but you're not more of a child. Also, all the chapters we spoke about, anything that we spoke about becoming humble or looking past yourself, I think is also a setup for Ahavas Yisroel. You need that. That's where it stems from. But the biggest thing about Ahavas Yisroel that the Alter Rebbe tells us is it's all about your perspective in life. Ahavas Yisroel can be something very easy for you if you approach her in the right way. Versus for people, it's difficult for them. That's because their whole approach, their outlook is misguided, or it's a little bit off track. So, if we fulfill everything we've discussed before, and all the chapter, everything else before, etc., 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 if you make your body as disgusting to you, etc., as in the sense of not holding your material self to be more. The whole thing with the king's daughter and the farmer with the potatoes. Physical world doesn't make me happy. So when you realize that your body is kind of secondary to your soul, and its refinement, that kind of stuff, and we focus only on the joy of the soul, which is also what the last chapter ended off with, trying to make the soul happy, and that's like someone being freed from captivity. Remember, it's like coming out of exile, because the soul is in exile in the body, it can't do what it wants to do, and the soul is in the nefesh kiss. It's like, hey, let's go do this, and the nefesh the body are like, never mind, let's not do that. We want to go clubbing, we want to go to the beach, we don't want to be sitting and learning. No, we're not volunteering today, we're going to do our own thing. So we shift our focus and we realize that these are secondary things. Pursuit of the material world, it's yucky what you're pursuing, and it's all secondary, and instead we're going to focus on making the soul happy. We're not going to give the soul potatoes to make it happy, because the soul's a princess. You have to give it jewels and diamonds and things like that, expensive stuff, and symphonies. Then, it's a straight and easy path for a person to reach Ahavas Yisroel. If we come from the right point, if we have the right starting point, then Ahavas Yisroel is a direct and easy path for us to achieve. Another thing, what Parak Lamed Beis does, when it talks about Ahavas Yisroel, kind of like the new thing that it gives us, in halacha, it tells us how to treat everybody right. When it talks about that kind of stuff, how to treat somebody else. Treat others like yourself, it's going to look like what it looks like in translation. But in Tanya, it's going to teach you how to love somebody like yourself. Halacha doesn't mandate love in the way that Tanya is going to explore it, that you can actually come to love somebody else as yourself. It says, but in practical halacha, what does that look like? Well, it looks like the treatment of somebody. But Tanya wants you to actually love them. So, now we have a very good question. How can you love someone as yourself, especially once you get to know them? It's very easy to love the collective. To love, humanity, the Jewish people as a whole, or I love this family, whatever. But once you get to know somebody and you actually get to kind of see the truth of them, it gets a little bit harder to love them, especially if you don't like them. So, how can we achieve this? How can we get to the state where you're going to have actual love for somebody else? How do we get here? That's what we're going to try to figure out here. So, what's one of the main things that we have to focus on with all this? How can we love somebody like ourselves? Who actually knows the greatness, the heights, and the source of the soul in God, God of life, etc., etc. Also, we all have the same Father. Therefore, all the Jewish people were literally called brothers. We say, oh, you're my brother. We don't mean it as a figurative term, we mean a literal term, because we all come from the same Father. As in, how can you actually love someone like yourself, especially once you get to know them? Number one, you don't know. You cannot see that person's soul. You're holding yourself superior to them, but you have no clue. You don't know. Which actually, in a way, harkens back to Laman, which originally introduces the whole idea of shiftless. Don't judge someone until you've been in their place. Even if they transgress, you don't know what kind of exertion they put into or what kind of challenges they face. And you think you're so much better. When's the last time you broke a sweat to try to do something? So, Ahavas Yisroel is the same sort of idea, and you don't know where that soul comes from. You're looking at the packaging of the soul, as in the body that it's been put into. And you're going to judge someone based on what their packaging is. It's like saying, well, this diamond must be worthless because the box was scuffed. That's such an ignorant thing to say. Especially a diamond merchant will tell you, well, stop looking at what was put into it. Look at the actual diamond. We have to tell the whole story of the Rebbe and the diamonds, right? Each soul. And not just that. This is your actual brother. So the same way that sometimes your brother might annoy you, sometimes your brother's a little bit difficult to deal with and makes little foolish decisions. The same way your brother, your siblings, they can annoy you, whatever. You love them. It's an underlying love that's also inexplicable. Oh, why do you love them? Because they're my brother. Since when is that an explanation? That's not a reason. Oh, my brother? That's like because mommy said so. But it actually is, because there's an inherent love between siblings that even when they're bugging each other, it's there. It's still there. The Jewish people, we are actual brothers. You're trying to say, I don't like this guy or whatever it is. It's like you're rejecting your own sibling because we all come from the same father. Literally. Well, we actually do. Okay, I'm going to sidebar. One of my marm that I'm doing with one of my other classes, it mentioned this whole thing about Adam. Why was Adam created alone? So there's a lot of different reasons that they give for it. It's interesting where it comes in, because where it comes in the Gemara, it's talking about court cases and murder and stuff like that. So one reason says Adam was created alone to show that each person is a whole world, which is if you save a life of a Jewish person, it's like you saved an entire world. That's where the Gemara brings that whole thing in. Another reason it says, so that if there would be multiple people created at the same time, someone would say, oh, there are multiple gods and they each created their person. They each created their ideal human. There's only one person, there's one God who created one human. The last thing that it says, where the punchline that I was actually getting to, is that you see the entire humanity came from one person. So all 8 billion of us came from one person. So how can anyone think that what they do is insignificant? Or no one should ever think that what they're doing is not relevant, because the entirety of humanity came from only one man. Which is how you get to B'Shvili Nivra Olam. That the world was created for me, as in the light that I add to the world is that relevant and that significant. Because one person could be the progenitor of all of humanity, then that shows the power that one person can have. So that's very powerful. All these things we see is the same kind of idea. The point is, because we're so materialistically oriented and we're physically oriented, we focus so much on the packaging and we neglect to acknowledge and pay attention that what's inside is so far superior to what the packaging is, but also that the packaging does not reflect what the interior is. The packaging of a person's soul does not reflect the level of the person's soul. So everybody who is so gorgeous and so successful, that would mean that they have the highest possible souls. And that's not true. A lot of people who are gorgeous and successful are jerks. People try to name drop on me now. I'm like, oh, I saw whomever. I'm like, oh yeah, and what did that do for the rest of humanity? What relevance does this have to the world? It's the whole celebrity culture thing, that just because someone's successful at something, we elevate them as godlike figures. Why? What good have they done? Because they acted well in a movie? So what? Most of them are corrupt and they're all sleeping with each other also. So I mean, come on already. Anyways, sidebar. So going back, the point is we don't know the source of another person's soul, as in we don't know what level this person's soul's at, number one, especially because we know also from Perek Beis that sometimes very high souls can be stuck into low places. That's what Klippa's trying to do, to try to balance. They hope that it won't fulfill its potential. And then the second thing is that we're all actual brothers. Taking it further, we know that the souls are the same, we're all the same holy soul, but the bodies are what separate us, because the bodies are all different. Oh, that's the other thing with Adam, and it shows how great is the work of the Creator, that if a person makes coins, they stamp it all with the same seal and they're all the same coin. But God stamped everybody in the image of Adam, and we're all completely different. Anyway, back to this. Soul is saying the bodies are separate. Ergo, therefore, the greater value placed on the body instead of the soul, the greater the difference is between himself and others. When you say that the relevancy is within the body, skin color, or all this other thing that everybody makes up these days, all this identity stuff that has nothing to do with who you are inside, but has much more to do with who you are on the outside, you're focusing on what's different about us and not what's the same about us. And not the same of like, oh, we're all unique, but in the sense of that you're fortifying and you're highlighting and you're strengthening the barriers between us. Because we don't have the same face and we don't have the same everything. I think that's also for the Gemara. The same way that no two faces are alike, and like we have no problem with that, but no two people think the same way. But then all of a sudden then we have a problem with someone's not thinking like us kind of thing. We're supposed to be different and unique individuals. The point is not to emphasize what separates us. The point is to emphasize what makes us similar. Which is actually, side note, when you talk about with writing, well, you have to find the universal truth, universal truth. Well, why do you need a universal truth? Because that's something that transcends the bodies we're all in, and that speaks to all of us. Which is why there's so much emphasis sometimes on like love stories, because everybody wants to feel love. There's so much emphasis sometimes on stories of heroism, or like people who are determined and they overcome all odds. Because that's not a skin color. That's not an orientation. That's not even a specific religious sect. That is something that's universal to all people. We all want to be driven. We all want to accomplish. We all want to do something great. So that's what speaks to all of us. That's something that transcends the body. And that's how we can get everybody talking. We focus on the similarity. The similarities that we have are not on the outside. It's on the inside. The fact that you can't stand somebody else is probably because your focus on them, your emphasis on them is on the physical outside and not on the inside. Therefore, someone who is like that, the result is that they are required to create a love for his fellow, which can never equal a natural innate love. Because you've been so separated, you don't have to go about trying to create a love for somebody else. Your focus has been so much on the things that separate us. This natural innate love that you could have or should have to a fellow Jew, to somebody, to your brother, you've almost rejected it in a way. You've separated yourself from that as well. Because you didn't focus on the things that actually make us brothers. Instead, you focus on things that are external. Love between people who consider bodies as primarily important, that are based on external factors. Ahavas Yisroel b'davar versus Ahavas she'ena tluya b'davar. Ahavas she'tluya b'davar. Love, it's limited limited to the relevance of the factor. The love is destined to endure only as long as the factor is valid. So if a man loves a woman just because she's beautiful, then that love is limited to the beauty of the woman. Also, if the beauty fades, then the love is no longer valid anymore, which is why all this kind of stuff has to transcend the external if you want the love to last. I actually had one of my thought questions for the high schoolers last year was find something nice about someone you don't like, because it's very hard to hate someone once you can think of something nice about them. It doesn't mean you're going to become best friends with them, but it's much harder to not like them. Especially when you look at the good of somebody else, it softens, because you can't have so much animosity to someone. Even if someone's like a total jerk, you're like, they're a total jerk, but they always look out for their people. Well, it's actually a pretty good thing. It's hard then to have the same kind of ire toward them. I can fill in the blank with anything. It's actually a pretty good exercise. Okay, I can't stand this person right now, but I have to find one thing good about them. Moving on, we have basically the whole story with Hillel. The person who wants to convert, he went to Shammai, tell him the whole Torah on 1 foot, he chased them away. Then he comes to Hillel and says, tell him the whole story on 1 foot, and Hillel says, don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to yourself. This is the whole Torah, and the rest is commentary. Go learn it. How could Hillel say that this is the entire Torah? Because it's not just saying that love of fellow Jews is what the entire Torah is about. Oh, if you love somebody else, now you fulfill the whole Torah. Because I always just say a bunch of love is in the air, and now we fulfill the Torah. When we look at it from this perspective, where does love of a fellow Jew come from? It comes from the emphasis on the soul. So it comes from recognizing the godliness and recognizing the God factor. That is what the entire Torah is based upon. I mean, you could love someone else despite the external differences because of the soul is what allows you to love somebody else despite external differences. When you could shift your perspective to focus on the soul over the body, now you can fulfill the entire Torah. So we say what's hateful to you, don't do to others. This is the whole Torah. It's because it's the shift of perspective that occurs, saying it's soul over body, which is what the whole Torah is about, putting God above our own self. Soul over body is basically God over our own self. I don't remember who it, maybe one of you guys remember who the story is with. I don't know what actually precipitated it, but the Rebbe basically said to someone, why is the heart put on the left side of the body? It seems like the heart should be on the right side, especially because the right side is the side of chesed. So it seems like the heart was put on the wrong side of the body. You should put on the right side because the right is chesed, right is ava, and all that sort of stuff. Actually, the heart is put on the correct side of the body because when you're facing someone else, then it's on their right side. That's what your heart is about. Not about you, it's about your feeling towards somebody else. That's what it is. So when you sit across from someone, your heart is on their right side because that's the point. There's actually another thing. I saw it in a letter. I remember what it said. I don't remember what letter it was or where, whatever. The Rebbe is writing to someone that it talks about how the Baal Shem Tov says, a person could come down to this world for 70 to 80 years just to do a favor for somebody else, just to do an act of kindness for someone else. The Rebbe says, can you imagine that a soul has to go through what it has to go through to come down to the world, come down to a body, just to do a favor for someone else? This one favor that you do, this act of chesed that you do for somebody else justifies an entire 70 to 80 years of existence. The one favor that you do for somebody else justifies dragging the soul down into this world. It justifies an entire lifetime. It justifies the creation of this person. That's level one. Level two is, can you imagine what a lifetime of this sort of behavior does? If one validates the entire existence, imagine someone who's constantly engaged in working for others, helping others, doing for others, etc. So we look at the story of Hillel. How could Hillel say, we'll summarize it by calling it Ahavas Yisroel. How could Hillel say that's the entire Torah? There's a lot of stuff going on in the Torah. There's Karbanos. What does that have to do with Ahavas Yisroel? How can you reduce it to V'afta l'recha kamocha? How can you reduce it to the way you treat somebody else? That's kind of what the question is. Because the Alter Rebbe was looking at it, he said, we're talking about what allows the specific mitzvah to come about. As in, to have Ahavas Yisroel for somebody, truly love somebody else, you can't truly love somebody else unless you can look past the physical body. And what's past the physical body is the soul. It's the spiritual element of them. That is where true love for somebody else could come in. Because if anything that you love for somebody else, it's based on an external factor. That's ava shetluya b'davar. It's ava that's dependent. It's contingent upon a factor. And whatever that factor is, it's something external. And once it's external, it's limited. It's contingent upon however long that lasts for. So if you want a true Ahavas Yisroel for somebody else, or for someone you don't like, how do you get Ahavas Yisroel for them? You have to look past the external, as in the physical. You have to be able to focus on and look toward the spiritual, a soul. And when you see a soul, there's no difference in the soul. As far as, this is a piece of God, I'm a piece of God. When I'm rejecting another piece of God, I'm a piece of God. Rejecting your own brother kind of thing. Or like saying I'm more of a child to God than you're a child to God. God doesn't confetti creation. Everybody's deliberately created. So you're going to reject that which God deliberately created because what, you don't like the packaging of it? It doesn't mean that you have to go shopping with them every day. You don't have to go to lunch with them every day. But it does mean that any hatred or animosity you have toward them in you, like, where is that coming from? That's what we're talking about. Also, what are you rejecting? So fine, you're rejecting the physical part of them, the external part of them. What's so great about your external part? So going back to Hillel, what's it saying? The true approach of Torah is focusing on the spiritual, as in the God factor. As in, how can I reject any mitzvah of God? How can I reject God's will? I wouldn't reject any of that because my focus is on the soul, making the soul happy, realizing that the body is just a casing for the soul. Of course, the soul needs to be in a body to achieve something. But real existence, the real reality is geared towards spirituality, not towards physicality. We give too much import and we give too much credence to things that are finite and insignificant. So when we shift our perspective to focus on what's infinite and what's truly significant, now we can approach Torah. Now we can truly fulfill the Torah because we know what comes first. We know what's more important. And we know that, I'm not in the mood. That's not a reason to not be doing the mitzvah right now. Because I'm not in the mood is a physical attribute. It's a rejection of the spiritual. And also, the whole point of the Torah is to elevate the soul over the body, to elevate the spiritual over the physical, to make the physical spiritual, which is what this is all about. Which, by the way, if you go back, before the Baal Shem Tov's father passed away, he gave him 2 mandates. Fear no one but God, and have Ahavas Yisroel for every single Jew. We see how this is woven into the foundation of Tanya. All of it is there. That God is it, and here we have the Ahavas Yisroel chapter, but we see that Ahavas Yisroel is contingent on so many other factors that Tanya brings in. Building on the Hillel story. This is the basis and the purpose of the entire Torah. Number 1, to elevate and exalt the soul over the body. Number 2, to draw down the light of Ein Sof into the community of Israel. As in to bring godliness, holiness, etc., the light of God into the physical world and among the Jewish people. Why is obviously so important? Because it's impossible in a place of disunity. Because God does not dwell in an imperfect, fragmented place. As in, God does not dwell in a place of disunity. When we do not have Ahavas Yisroel toward each other, that is fragmentation. That is imperfection. Versus when we are united with each other, this is now a place where God can dwell. Now we have a question, because we know everybody here is very makbid about these sort of things. The Talmud says that if one sees his friend sinning, he should hate him. So where does this all come in? You just gave me all these speeches about loving somebody else. So different perspectives. Someone came to the Friedrich Rebbe and was saying something like, why you spend so much time? You're trying to go after all these people who are all the poshim, all the sinners, all these people who don't know, and you're spending so much time bringing them close and trying to build up in these communities. Why are you focusing on all these people? We even know that halacha tells us, etc., etc. So the Friedrich Rebbe said, this whole halacha about how you have to hate somebody, that is in the end of Shulchan Aruch. Let's figure out first how to fulfill every other part of Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll worry about this part of Shulchan Aruch. That's one thing. Now, another thing is there's a lot of contingencies for this, of hating somebody else. Because first of all, you actually have to be on the same level. You actually have to whatever. So it's easy to just throw it out there, like, oh, look, we have to hate somebody else, but there's a lot of requirements that have to be met first, which usually most people are not meeting it. They have to be your actual equal, which, okay, we ever get there. And. Still with all that, we have Havei Mitzvah Shal Aaron, O Shalom, V'Rodav Shalom, O V'Zabris Makav in the Torah. Hillel said, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving creatures and drawing them near to the Torah. Why is this a feature of Aaron? Because Ovis Abrios, why does it use the word Brios? It doesn't say Ovis as Kol HaAnashim. Ovis Abrios and Makav in the Torah, love all the creatures and draw them near to Torah. Because sometimes the only thing a person has in their favor is that they are a creation of God. They seem to be so low and so despicable and so everything else, and yet they are a creature of God. And thereby, this is someone we have to draw close, we have Ahavas Yisroel toward them. This is the whole thing with you're supposed to hate someone, and even if you rebuke them and they don't change their ways, but even though you're supposed to hate them, you still have to love them at the same time. How can you have both at the same time? How can both coexist? First of all, you hate what your friend's doing, not who your friend is. That's like the story of Rebbe Meir, all the hooligans move into town, they're causing a bunch of trouble for everybody. Then he finally tells his wife, that's it, I'm praying for God to get rid of them. And his wife says, don't pray to get rid of them, pray to get rid of the evil within them. This is how quote unquote hatred and love can coexist, because I can hate the evil that's within you, but still love you as a person. So Shein and MS, these are both true. You can have both exist at the same time. You hate the evil that's within them. And the love that you have for them is because the truth of who they are is the spark of God that's in them, which obviously is going to transcend everything else. So it's still a mitzvah to love another because we hate the evil within them and we love the good, which is the spark of Hashem within him. Something with that, because again, there's a lot of contingency with that. I don't know if you've ever seen the phrase, I think it's from Teddy Roosevelt. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. Something like that. So this whole thing with rebuking your friend, there's a lot of contingency. Like, oh no, I'm doing it for them. Are you really? You're just glad to be superior to somebody right now. But again, at the same time, love and fear can coexist. First of all, also because they're coming from 2 different places and they're focused on 2 different things in this particular regard. Then we also have Yaakov Asher Padas Avram, compassion banishes hatred and arouses love. If we can't have Rahmanas on the person because of the evil that's taken over them, the evil that's within them, this will eventually dissolve the hatred we have toward them also, and it will bring about love for them. And we see that because you have Yaakov Asher Padas Avram, Yaakov who redeemed Avraham. Yaakov is Rachmanos, it's Tiferes which is Rachamim, and Avram, which is Chesed and Ava, kindness and love. Compassion and mercy redeems the love for the person. If we can have compassion toward them in this regard and realize this is not the real them, who's the truth of them, the real them is the spark of God that's within them, then that will reignite, kindle, etc., the love that we have for somebody else. And that's chapter 32 in a nutshell. Well, because we're not doing it in text. Think about that. It's basically saying, I was not entirely saying, but it's basically saying like the reason why you can't love somebody else is because you're so stuck in your own self. You're so physically narrow-minded. It's also, I think, because sometimes people get a little bit, I don't want to say maybe scared of Ahavas Yisroel because they think that means that, oh, now we have to be everybody's best friend kind of thing. And I don't want to be everybody's best friend. No, you don't have to be everybody's best friend. The point is, number one, you shouldn't feel hatred in your heart towards somebody else. That's obviously a thing. Or animosity. And, oh, I can't stand that person. Then try to turn it into goodwill towards somebody. What's it to you if that person has a good life? Be happy for them. Have goodness in your heart towards them. You can still live and let live and have Ahavas Yisroel at the same time. But I think some people think that they're mutually exclusive or something. Ahavas Yisroel means that everybody's my best friend now. That's not specifically what it means. It could be just me, but I think a lot of people, we jump to the most extreme conclusion, the farthest conclusion. Because some people are like that. Everybody's their best friend and everybody's whatever. And specifically, the practical is that, first of all, we don't reject anybody out of hand because someone's a little bit whatever, so let go of the annoyance you have. Just get rid of the animosity you have in your heart toward them. Maybe that person has this really lofty soul kind of, because it's such a high soul, it's put into such a weird packaging. Maybe be a little bit humble because who made you so perfect?